So I figure it's about time that I give a little bit of history on why I'm doing the stress resilience and anxiety work that I am. While it's a professional interest of mine, of course, from research and practice and the work that I've been doing in biofeedback and stress resilience and breathing behavior analysis, understanding overbreathing and such. Uh, the journey really it's a personal one, and it's one that I have. I feel very fortunate that I don't have the story that some people have had in terms of losing family members to suicide and things like that. But I don't want to diminish my experience in that I at one point in my life did contemplate and actually had a plan to commit suicide. Um, but let me back up. So I was as a kid I was raised as a hard worker and someone who dedicated a lot of time and energy to meeting the goals that I had for myself, which unfortunately, I mean, most people when they're kids, their goals that they set are often dictated by their parents, or at least heavily influenced by their parents. And the goals that I had, I think, were partially personal, but also, being driven by the positive influences of my mother, as well as the less than constructive influences of my father. But I was a fairly driven kid. I succeeded at school. I prided myself on high marks and perfect attendance, and all these things through elementary school. Um, but I did struggle under the weight of expectation of judgment, and that I think formed a lot of the challenges that I had later in life, that honestly maybe wouldn't have cropped up had it not been for my anxiety. I was doing actually really well in physio school, and at the time I was heavily involved in rugby, not only as a player but a coach and a referee. And there was one tournament where we traveled. I was actually coaching the boys and girls high school team that I coached here in Saskatoon. We were on a road trip, and so I was coaching, and that was all fine. I was supervising the kids after one of the tournament days, and there was a group of rugby team members from one of the other squads in a different city, and they were traveling down the main street or whatever, and of course I was wearing a rugby jersey, and I don't know if this person mistook me for one of the players or for someone who had badmouthed them or something like that. But anyway, this a real big guy. I'll use that to my defense because I'm a fairly little guy. But he jumped out of the truck that he was in and confronted me, and I stood up to him. But I don't remember how everything went down. I just remember that I woke up on the ground, and with some of the teammates and my co-coaches around me, that I'd been knocked out. And so I sustained a concussion with this individual who had slammed my head against the cement. I had retrograde amnesia, of course, because I don't remember exactly what happened, and I did, as I said, I did lose consciousness. was diagnosed with a concussion, but at the same time, at this point in time in the summer, this was the summer after my second year in physiotherapy school. I was also working as a teaching assistant and a research assistant for one of the professors in the school, and went back to work right away. The individual that I was working with basically told me that I was that I seemed very, very different. I mean, of course, I disclosed everything in terms of the concussion and what had happened, but that my personality had changed sort of on the spot. And it's very interesting to me to look at the personality that I have now and wonder how much of that is residual from the concussion or left over from that versus what would have happened or what my personality would be now had I not had that. But it was after that point that I started noticing that things were a lot more difficult for me in terms of not only concentration, but the motivation and the drive that I used to have would wax and wane. I mean, sometimes it would still be there, and sometimes it would be very. I'd be significantly driven. I mean, I finished after a year off. I ended up having to drop out in my third year and return from a medical leave at that point in time. But I did finish physio school, and at one point in time I did do a master's degree, and of course I did a PhD, and then have a relatively successful career in my opinion. But this is all in balance with the downside and the negative motivational factors. And I started to wonder, well, why am I so lazy at times? There'd be times when I couldn't get out of bed. There'd be times when I was thinking about what I had to do the next day, and it was causing me so much stress that I didn't know if I could do it. So even though I graduated from physio school and I got through and I started working, I was finding that even a half day at work was something that I couldn't handle. It was even the thought of just being there. Sometimes when you get there, it was actually okay. So to me, it's the thought of and the anticipation of going into something that causes the anxiety, which is really the definition of anxiety, is the worry of a future event happening. And so I would worry about going to work and having the energy to go to work. And it wasn't so much worry or as much just worry, it was also the feeling that I just couldn't do it and that I just couldn't handle it. So this anxiety became crippling, and it caused me to leave my job voluntarily, although I think if I hadn't left voluntarily, I would have been forcibly removed, given my lack of consistency in my attendance and performance. And so I feel quite bad for the clinic that I was working with at the time, and the individuals, especially at the front desk, that when I was calling in sick, that they were having to cancel my clients for me. So and of course, remember back in these days, we're talking about the late 1990s and early 2000s, mental health was not talked about. And so I didn't think anything other than the fact that maybe this was just me being lazy, me just not being able to cut it as a clinician, being able to cut it in the workforce. And I really do believe my path down graduate school and to do a master's and a PhD is something that really suits my personality and my skill set, and that I feel particularly on the education piece that I'm quite good at. I did struggle. I struggled a lot, and it basically, going back to school to do this graduate work felt like the flexibility that I needed to be successful with my anxiety. Having said that, we have to remember that at this time, I didn't know it was anxiety. I knew it as, it was just my personality. It was just, maybe even me being an introvert and not like being in social scenarios. And so but I didn't know. I wasn't diagnosed, but I know now that that's what it was. So I went through graduate school. My master's degree was quite quick, and was very successful. Had a lot of flexibility, which really suited what I was capable of doing, and the ups and downs that would come along with the anxiety that I had and the worry that I would have. Got back into the workforce as a physical therapist. Found a job that was relatively flexible. Again, in terms of not just patient in, patient out all the time. And, I quickly recognized that the busier I was with patient care, the closer I was feeling to overwhelm and burnout. So finding jobs that were flexible, that allowed me opportunities to do multiple things in the day and not just see clients, was really suited what I was capable of doing. And so having a job like that allowed me to pursue a different area as well. And it was in pulmonary rehab that where I had started with at this point in time, and then fell in love with the idea of what I was doing and the clients that I was seeing, because I'd see them in group settings, and it wasn't the patient in, patient out, one-on-one. So I pursued my PhD, but this was positive, but it was also one of the hardest times in my life. I was severely depressed throughout most of my PhD. That depression I attribute now to the anxiety, the lack of fulfillment that I was feeling. And there were many reasons for that, not just some challenges around the work, but in terms of my family situation and the lack of emotional support that I was getting from one half of my parentage. It was at that time during my PhD that there were a lot of frustrations around multiple aspects of my life, my work, my career, my relationship with my then wife, that were so difficult that it led me to wonder whether I could even manage day to day, and I could even get up in the morning, or if I'd make it, and through the activities of the things that I had to do that day. It got to the point where I started severely doubting that I could. And it was at that point where I really had several breakdowns in my mental health. And, this recognizing that it was mental health wasn't a thing. It was just, I just didn't think I could cut it. I didn't think that I was good enough. I felt like I was judged constantly. That's partly the anxiety, but it's partly due to the lack of emotional support and the judgment that I felt from my father. So it was at that time that I had come home from school that day. Don't remember the circumstances around it, but I remember coming home, and my wife at the time was working, and so I was there alone, and I wasn't gonna be able to make it. I had a plan. It involved a combination, I don't know why, but it involved a combination of pills and a knife, and had it all planned out that I was going to take some pills, and for good measure I was going to slice my forearms, and had it all planned out, had everything laid out, was ready to go, and I just broke down and cried, and I cried and cried and cried and cried, and never told anybody. This is the first time I've told anybody other than my current wife and my counselor that this was something that happened. I think I cried so hard that I wore myself out, and I lost the I lost the motivation to go through with it. And it was at that time that I basically recognized that I needed to talk to somebody and I needed help. I was that close and didn't. And I think that was luck, or maybe it was just my body telling me what I needed at that time. But anyway, I started the conversation with counselors. Didn't find a good counselor, or one that I connected with very well until, just even in the last couple of years, to be honest. So that's fast forward at least 15 years. It was tough, but I initiated the process at that point. The initial treatment was medication, and I think it helped for a bit. Certainly didn't do everything, but it certainly helped to regulate for the time being. And it started my journey. So I finished up my PhD, started work as a professor, with varying success again, ups and downs and ups and downs, periods of motivation combined with periods of not knowing if I could even walk into the workplace and teach my students, which I love doing. I love teaching students. And teaching is definitely something that I feel that I thrive doing, and that I have some skill associated with, but the anxiety just didn't allow me to feel fulfilled with that. And I struggled and on and off, still seeing counselors and that. I switched counselors at one point in time to someone who introduced me to the concept of mindfulness. And professionally, I had sort of gotten into thinking about mindfulness and mindfulness related practices simply because I was looking for something deeper in my outcomes of the research that I was doing. Mindfulness hit both of my professional and my personal journeys. And so I started studying it. I started studying mindfulness academically, and I started studying mindfulness personally. It's the mindfulness-based stress resilience course. And it had a huge impact on not just my mindset and my understanding of anxiety, and where a lot of the things that I thought, again, were laziness or lack of motivation, or that there was something wrong with me, were because I was not in the present moment. Me thinking about, the future, the horizon, and ruminating on the past. This was my anxiety. This was my challenge with mental health. And I saw with mindfulness that there was a different way. And I was trained as a physiologist for my PhD, so of course I wanted to know, well, what's actually changing in my body? Yeah, I mean, my mindset's changing and my abilities are changing, but I feel differently too. And so I really wanted to know why that was. And so I started investigating a multitude of factors that related to resilience and mindfulness. And this led me to thinking about the autonomic nervous system and polyvagal theory, as well as concrete biomarkers of our anxiety and our nervous system. And this led me to heart rate variability, as well as the concepts around overbreathing and hypocapnia. And that's really what's driven my current work. So if I had to say anything around my mental health, that mindfulness and its derivatives, and when I say derivatives, I'm talking about some of these physiological factors like breathing regulation and heart rate variability and biofeedback, have made such a huge impact on my life, to the point where I feel like when I recognize when I feel anxiety and what that is, and I recognize physiologically what that is doing to me, what it does to my thoughts and what it does to my body, and I know how to change it. I recognize it and I can just change. It's just like, a switch flipping, that it flips on when I feel it, but then I can go, oh, wait a second, that switch just went on. And by doing a combination of thinking about the way that I'm approaching things and doing physiological regulation work, I flip that switch back off. And I just kind of sit with it, right? And be in the present moment. And the anxiety goes away. It's incredible. It's not a cure necessarily. Maybe for some it is. I certainly think for me it's as close to a cure as I'll ever get. But monitoring what I'm doing in my physiological sensations and knowing that I can have control over that is huge. So I guess the moral of the story is, there's a number of morals here. One, talk about it. This is cathartic for me to be able to put this out there for the world, but also talk about the journey and the direction, but also that some of the things that guaranteed way back when I had the concussion and would have needed good quality mental health work at that time, I would not have been receptive to it. I was a young guy, very proud, very raised again not to express a lot of emotion, and the thought of mindfulness as an intervention would have been too hocus pocus for me. I wouldn't have listened. So my suggestion and the moral here for anyone that's listening to this is that it's not hocus pocus. It's it's a very concrete scientific method that goes back millennia to help you to regulate, to know how you can be in control of your reactions and give yourself some time and space to respond appropriately, and that you can build your nervous system responses. The fight and flight versus rest and digest, those are trainable things. We can look at how we can train our nervous systems to be able to jump into fight or flight as needed, but only when needed, and to be able to come out of it in a productive way rather than being constantly in a fight or flight, where this is that anxiety. I would be in so much fight or flight and feeling anxious that I would burn out by the end of the day of doing almost nothing. It's just that constant fight or flight is exhausting. And I withdrew. And a lot of the withdrawal, I recognize now, is one of the reasons that I went into the depression that I did back in the early 2000s, and where I was close to attempting suicide. So yeah, the moral of the story is that there's work you can do, and it's important work, but it's also preventative work too. So don't wait until you're at the point where you don't feel like you have another option. You can train this now. You can learn this now. This is something that is within the grasp of all of us. So reach out and grab it.